Hi guys, welcome to my presentation. I'm Ariel Surface, and today I will be leading you through Junji Ito's Spiral of Horror. So let's get right into it. Who is Junji Ito? Junji Ito is a horror mangaka, and basically he tends to specialize in either paranormal or psychological horror. He was born into the prefecture of Gifu in 1963, which is in Japan, of course. He used to be a dental assistant, like way back in the day, but then he broke out of that to do manga after he won a competition with the first chapter of what would later become one of his most well-known stories, Tommy. He's happily married now with a wife and 2 kids. And if we look back at kind of his past when he was a kid, he used to look up to people like Kazuo Umezu, a horror mangaka. And in fact, right now, a lot of people debate whether Kazuo or Junji are the best all-time horror mangaka ever, which I think is super cool to kind of be pitted against the person you looked up to, if that makes sense. But going back kind of to Junji's main influences, we can also see a lot of Lovecraft in his work, a lot of the same eldritch almost elements. Some themes you'll also catch on to here are some poverty, nightmares, gore, body horror, and then of course daylight horror, which all that means for daylight horror is that whatever is going on in the story is happening under normal circumstances. You're not in the bottom of a dark basement. It's not suddenly 3 a.m. and you're out alone in a cemetery. No. Daylight horror just means anytime, any situation, anything bad can happen, which is what adds that layer of just suspense and almost like a sickness in your stomach when you read some of his work because of how turbulent it can get. Speaking of turbulent and sick to your stomach, let's talk about Uzumaki. Now, Uzumaki was created in 1998 by Junji Ito, and the word Uzumaki just means spiral in Japanese. As you can see from this picture, his comic here focuses a lot on obsession and manipulation, and the idea of there's something else kind of out there. So in this particular scene, this guy is collecting every single spiral object that he can find. And the whole course of the story is similar to that, where people and things and places are slowly spiralizing, but on like a grand scheme of things, which I think is super cool. It kind of reminded me of when we looked at Buddhist art and Buddhist temples, how there's a lot of like navigating these temples and the idea of the center and reincarnation, that life is just this giant circle or a spiral. And Junji Ito really portrays that well in a lot of his work, particularly Uzumaki. The idea of reincarnation is huge, but I'm not going to spoil the ending for you. I'm really excited because this one is getting turned into an Adult Swim adaptation of the anime basically in 2021, which just means that they're probably not gonna dumb it down like some anime companies do. And there was also a live action movie in 2000 of this work, but it wasn't that awesome. Looking kind of at spirals in this particular scene, this is glyceride, or a lot of Americans call it grease. Basically, long story short, this story is so gross. It's nasty. If you have a weak stomach, I wouldn't recommend it. But the themes are so powerful in this one. This girl can detect these levels of glyceride around her, of grease, of fat in the air, and she sees it start to slowly consume her family. First, her mother leaves, and then her dad starts drinking literal bottles of oil, and then her brother becomes abusive, and then her dad becomes abusive, and it's just this whole cycle, just awful. And a lot of people think that it's super gross, highlighted here, but I think it's a political commentary, and so do a lot of people. Because if you think about this idea of grease, and that it's slowly destroying her life, and you swap out something like alcohol or drugs, it changes the entire way you look at the picture, and it challenges the way you look at the family, the traditional Japanese family, or even Asian in general, if we want to talk about stereotypes, very honor bound, very has to stay together no matter what, a little bit different than your um, American interpretation of a family. And I think Junji Ito really challenges this, and that if this girl chose to get away, she probably could, but she feels attached to her family. And that's a whole plot line in so many of his other works. This one really, I felt, tied in strongly with what we've been practicing and learning about in class. Another one that I kind of just wanted to throw in there very briefly was that a little bit of an anomaly in Junji Ito's work, Frankenstein. He actually adapted the full-length novel of Frankenstein into his manga. And that's not very traditional for Junji Ito because he doesn't usually borrow stories, if that makes sense. He makes his own content, generally speaking, and it's very rare for him to draw something that didn't take place in Japan. A lot of his themes are very traditional, and this one was very different. So I felt like it was important to mention. Here's a couple credits, some really good sources for some interviews. And I just wanted to leave you today with this super cool quote on why Junji Ito does horror. So here we go. Junji Ito says that, quote, "The future is uncertain, and we don't know what is going to happen. Maybe something bad is waiting for us, like we don't know. And there's this uncertainty, that anxiety that comes from that. So if we see something scary, if we look at these scary things, then maybe we can prepare mentally for that. Maybe it's some kind of readying our minds for possible future terrors." That's a theory that I have, and I think that's the value in horror, and seeing something scary. And that was by Junji Ito. I hope that you all have a wonderful day, and thank you so, so much for tuning in to my presentation on the horror legend, Junji Ito. Thank you.